And we have breaking news coming in, and this is breaking news in regard to actor Darshan. So let's just get you the latest when it comes to the Supreme Court will not commit at this particular point in time. It seems that the High Court gave an acquittal order, but the Supreme Court there is in fact saying that we will not commit the same mistake as the High Court has done in this regard. It really seems that the High Court gave an acquittal order. This is as far as the High Court's wrap is concerned, wrapping the High Court on the bail that was given to the actor Darshan. Do remember, this is in that case that led to the murder of a man, actor Darshan, along with his co-star that were responsible for allegedly for the murder of that man in Karnataka. Of course, this is the latest that we are getting for you. This is shocking that the High Court judgment and that the High Court judge could make such a mistake. That is what the Supreme Court is saying in the Darshan case. To know more on this case and what the Supreme Court has really said, it's over to my colleague Nupur joining us from right outside the Supreme Court. Nupur, of course, trying to correct the errors and the mistakes made by the High Court. Is the Supreme Court coming down heavily on the High Court, saying that this was a grave mistake and that bail shouldn't have been given to the actor?
Well, yes, Divya, of course, not only the actor, but all the 7 accused in the case that were granted bail by the High Court. The Supreme Court today made really some very strong observations and said that it seemed that the High Court has granted acquittal in a bail order. And the way it said that it's not the bail that is granted, it's the concern, the reasoning that was granted for the bail is of grave concern to the top court. The top court, in fact, came down heavily on the High Court for especially the reason it gave, saying that grounds of arrest were not furnished. The Supreme Court Judge Justice J.B. Fardiwala said that how can a High Court judge pass such an order, and it made it clear that a sessions judge making such a mistake in granting bail can be acceptable, but it is totally unacceptable coming from a High Court judge that he passes such order granting bail on such grounds. And the court observed that these grounds were in fact frivolous and did not stand in the question of law. The top court has today concluded hearing arguments from all the petitioners in the case and also from the Karnataka government. It has reserved its order, but it has given out a warning, a clear message that while deciding whether the bail should continue or not, it will not commit the same mistake as the High Court has done. And it will, in fact, consider all the grounds, and it asks some very, very grilling questions, serious questions, big questions to the lawyers appearing for actor Darshan and other accused in the case. In fact, for advocate appearing for Pavitra Gowda, she was also confronted with very tough questions from the Supreme Court. Supreme Court went through the call details, through all the evidence that were placed on record. It asked them questions that why were so many calls were made, what was the reason of this. Every little thing was questioned by the Supreme Court today. It also questioned the Karnataka High Court, Karnataka government, that what is the timeline for the trial and how long it can take. So very big remarks being made by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court for now has reserved the order, but has sent out a clear message that it is very unhappy with the High Court order and High Court approach of granting bail to actor Darshan and all the 7 accused for that matter in the Renukaswamy murder case, saying that it seems that they are being granted acquittal in a bail order by the High Court without trial.
Pavitra, the co-star of actor Darshan, was accused number 1 and Darshan as accused number 2 in that particular case. And of course, the police are claiming that Renukaswamy's act of sending offensive messages to Pavitra, that was the reason that really led to his murder. Deepak joining us from Bengaluru to get us the very latest. Deepak, of course, the Supreme Court saying that the High Court's made a huge mistake and they're trying to fix that error and that mistake, and that the actor and the others in the case, cannot be granted bail because there is enough evidence against the actor as well as his co-star.
Well, very strong observations, not for the first time, the second time now. Last week as well, the Supreme Court had a few things to say about how the High Court really gave bail to Darshan, and that too in a manner that the Supreme Court felt was unprecedented. Now, this is an actor who's been accused of murder. He's accused number 2. The person who's accused number 1 is said to be a person he was in a relationship with. It is on her behest. He's gone ahead, asked this individual to be kidnapped and then thrashed him, kicked him so brutally that he had multiple injuries, internal bleeding. They had even damaged his privates and eventually dumped him, by a drain. That's how brutal the crime was. And, he initially gets an interim bail on medical grounds. He goes to the hospital in and out, claiming that he wants to have surgery. There were several question marks about whether that even, happened the way, it was narrated. Then question marks about how he was treated like a VIP while he was seated inside the prison, sitting there, as if he was in a coffee shop along with his friends, seated on a chair. These are the, visuals that really shook the conscience of everybody, saying, is this how law is, going to be for the high and mighty, the powerful, or for the popular? And now, the Supreme Court making some critical, strong observations. In all likelihood now, there could be trouble coming his way. If it does it mean he's going back into jail? And there, will he be treated like a common prisoner like everybody else, is also another question if that does happen. Again, we're not, of course, preempting what the Supreme Court is going to say, but if it does happen, it is a possibility. And then more importantly, we should also here take note of the fact that he's also given, approvals to travel abroad to shoot for a movie. Is this not a potential risk of a person who is so powerful, who has a lot of wealth? In fact, the police, initially sources did suggest that a lot of money was paid off for people to come and confess to the crime so that Darshan is not even involved. Now, this is the kind of influence that he wields. Now, putting him on bail not only puts the risk of tampering, eyewitnesses, but also the potential risk of him evading any more future arrests or, appearing before the law enforcement agencies. Now, he's given permission to travel abroad to shoot for a movie at a time where the Supreme Court is making some critical observations about, the bail that was granted to him by the Karnataka High Court. So it's definitely going to be interesting how things pan out in the days to come.
Right, in order to know more on this, we also have Veera joining us in order to know more. Veera, take us through the background of this case. Like, Deepak was pointing out that a lot of fingers were being raised as to the leniency that was being given to the actor. He was complaining of having a back issue. He was, in the hospital claiming to be very seriously unwell. He had various grounds on which he was seeking bail. And of course, the Supreme Court had come down heavily saying that we're not convinced as to the order of the High Court. And that was said about a week ago. This case was coming up in the Supreme Court yesterday, but was deferred to today. Take us to what's really happened in court today.
Well, remember, look, just as Deepak was pointing out, this is not the first observation. The second time that the Supreme Court is making a sharp observation on the High Court's order granting Darshan bail. Now, this raises a larger question of those influential people like Darshan, who have been committed who are being tried for heinous crimes. Is bail a right, A? And B, as Deepak was pointing out, it's about traveling abroad, going in for shooting. When the case is going on, the person is virtually free. So I think the Supreme Court is raising very serious concerns over the bail here for Darshan in a case, as Deepak was pointing out, which was gruesome to say the least. Of course, there are graphic details that can be pointed out on it, but it raises a very large question about the order of bail itself in the Darshan case. And I think the fact that the case went out of public attention, and once it went out of public attention, that despite the heinousness and the seriousness of the crime, that the actor is out on bail, virtually being able to live a normal life. Does he have the potential to influence the case, given that he's an influential star? Multiple questions there. Obviously, the order has been reserved right now. One has to see the final order because often courts make strong observations. We'll have to see what the final order is. And all of this becomes substantial only if the final order is one that cancels bail. So if that's the case, then obviously he'll have to head back to jail. But it raises a far more serious question, one that may not be restricted to this case alone.
Right, of course, Veera, this is a case that has, in fact, garnered a lot of attention because of the brutal manner in which Renukaswamy was murdered. This was because he was sending texts to Pavitra, the co-star of actor Darshan, and that is because he was not happy with the actor having a relationship, though he was married, with his co-star, and that is why he was sending her derogatory messages, and that is something that really irked the actor, and that is when this murder was planned. There are others involved in the case as well. Deepak, back to you. Take us through, Darshan, he was in prison. He had spent about 131 days in custody, but many of those days he was out on bail.
Well, now it doesn't anymore count how many days he was on bail or, how many days he was in custody. The question is, has he gotten away because, there was a lapse of judgment? At least the Supreme Court here, in its observations, at least thinks that the High Court should have been more judicious in its approach of giving bail. Now, how will this really be taken by Darshan? Now, considering the fact that these are very strong critical observations, which hint at the fact that there is a strong possibility that his bail could be rejected and he could be going back to prison. At this point in time, will he present himself before the enforcement agencies? If that arises is the question. Now, again, I don't want to jump the gun. We've been saying, these are observations, quite strong ones made by the Supreme Court. The order is still awaited, and the order could go either ways. There could be a relief, but if you go by the observations, that seems a far-fetched thought. If there is trouble, he is out there shooting for movies. He's out there traveling wherever he wants because courts have again given permission. Now, the simple question, even the Supreme Court asked this or made this observation. If this was any other individual accused of such a heinous crime, would he be allowed to travel freely in the manner that he did? Would he be allowed to be given bail on the grounds that Darshan was given? Would the same observations or the same order be passed in the case of every individual who's been accused of such a heinous murder like Darshan did? Now, these are pertinent questions to note. Up until now, there have been several people who've even been following, been mesmerized, been idol worshipping, Darshan. Now, it is, of course, going to be a big question mark on all these individuals. Now, while, such a crime is committed, until the person is acquitted, do you continue to, worship them as their heroes? Because this is a family now, which has been completely devastated by this murder. The person was sent to, custody after a lot of thorough investigation, and then if they can get away with bail so easily because of any reason, because they can afford good lawyers, they can pump in the kind of money to get the legal help that they need, or for any other reason, and then after getting bail to also manage to so easily, get away and continue their life as if nothing has happened. Is that possible? Is that possible for a common man as well in this country is a question. The Supreme Court today, of course, is questioning the very essence through which this bail was given and how easily it was, and probably if this order is in the line of the observations, it could be a precedent in itself.
Right. Also, let's just get in our colleague Nupur from outside the Supreme Court. Of course, the Supreme Court, they're saying this is a perverse exercise of judicial power.
Yes, Divya, today the Supreme Court bench headed by Justice J.B. Pardiwala has essentially made this remark that prima facie it feels that the High Court order granting bail to actor Darshan and the reasons that were cited, main issue with the Supreme Court was with the reasons that were taken on record by the High Court while granting bail to actor Darshan and the 7 accused basically in this case. The Supreme Court said that it is not just a case of murder, but it is a case of proper conspiracy, and High Court granting bail on the grounds that the grounds of arrest was not furnished in this case seems to be a grave mistake which can be acceptable from a Sessions Court judge for once, but not acceptable from a High Court judge. So, on one hand, the Supreme Court has made it very clear that it is not in agreement with the High Court order and the reasons deployed by it in granting bail. But on the other hand, there was another observation by the Supreme Court where it asked the Karnataka government that how long it can take for the trial to conclude. Because remember, getting bail in cases when the court considers that how long the trial can take. If the court is convinced that the trial can go on for long, then it might consider granting bail. But today the Karnataka High Court government told the Karnataka government told the Supreme Court that it is considering to hear the case on day-to-day basis. Then also the Supreme Court asked that would you grant similar kind of hearing and speedy trial to someone else just because he's an actor. But the Karnataka government clarified that only 65 witnesses are remain to be examined and the trial can be concluded in 6 months. If the Supreme Court is convinced with this particular argument by the Karnataka government, then this can go this can actually mean no bail for actor Darshan, because if the trial takes less time, then the Supreme Court will not consider granting him bail. However, the other reasons are still open. The Supreme Court has for now reserved the verdict, but these strong observations don't seem to help the actors and other accused in the case much.
Right, Nupur, let's get in our colleague Veera. And Veera, of course, the Supreme Court, they're saying that the reasoning given by the High Court is extremely troubling, going on to say that they won't make the same mistake, in fact. But take us through, isn't it a watertight case? The grounds on which, granting bail to accused number 2 or accused number 1 in this case is completely unacceptable. That's what the Supreme Court has gone on to say. Take us through, the reason, the motive behind the crime, the evidence in the crime, all, that the police has given. It is, of course, the Karnataka police who actually challenged the bail that's been given to the accused in the case.
The public prosecutors are the ones who have challenged. Let's get the facts right. As Nupur was categorically pointing out, it's not just the granting of bail that the Supreme Court has taken objection to. It's also the dictation and the reasoning given in the order, which the Supreme Court felt was almost like an acquittal in this case, given the kind of public focus that was there in this matter. We put most of the facts out. The case is under trial, and as Nupur points out, the question is also how long will the process take place. Given that this is a high-profile actor, there are serious questions raised over whether allowing somebody like this to be out on bail would influence the case, what kind of treatment was meted out. There's enormous amount of public scrutiny and attention in this case. One has to wait for the final order, Divya. At the moment, these are all just observations. One has to wait for the final order because there are two parts to this. One is the bail itself. The other is the reasoning given for the bail. The public prosecutors and the Karnataka government, of course, challenging the Karnataka High Court order granting bail to the accused in this case. One has to go through the legal nuances of this matter and wait for the order to come out, and that will be extremely important. And Nupur perhaps could update us on when that's expected from the apex court. If the order is one which cancels the bail, then there is no other option than for the star to return to jail. That would be very, very clear. What happens next in the case would all depend on that order from the apex court that we're going to wait for.
And from what we're hearing at the moment, in fact, Deepak, is that Darshan is in Thailand shooting for a film. So business as usual, even though this case is, pretty watertight. He is accused number 2 in the murder, a brutal murder of Renukaswamy, who was killed. And this was all because of the obscene messages, the derogatory messages that were sent to him by his fan, Renukaswamy. Take us through the details of how at a time like this, when the Supreme Court, of course, is finding issues, and this is something that happened a week ago, like you mentioned, it's not the first time the Supreme Court is having an issue with the bail that's been granted to the actor.
Right now he is shooting in Thailand. He's expected to return either tomorrow or day after. This is as per, the earlier order, which the court itself had given permission. First, he had asked for an earlier date. Then he couldn't travel during those dates. And then the dates were amended. Again, he had approached court. And the latest dates, of course, are right now currently underway. And he's expected to come back either tomorrow or day after. Now, at the back of these strong observations by the Supreme Court, and this is where a risk really lies in giving any person who's right now under trial for a murder to allow him to shoot for a movie. There is a possibility that he may think whether is this the right time for me to return, look at evasive tactics. Is that something that we are going to see, or is he going to be a person who's going to say, well, whatever consequences there are, I am going to face them head on. If I am not guilty of it, I am going to come out clean. But is he going to face the law is the question that comes up. But why has really the situation come up where, right now there is no control of the Indian police, or rather the Karnataka police now anymore, of where Darshan is, or whether if there is now, say, the bail is rejected by the Supreme Court, they'll really have to wait for Darshan himself to comply, for himself to come and come to India and then present himself before the police. The police have very limited options at this point in time to go and get him if this situation arises again. These are all things that I am trying to give perspective based on what happens in the Supreme Court. As of now, these are just critical observations. There's no order as of now. There is no rejection of bail, or there is also the Supreme Court not saying, well, it was right that the bail was granted by the Karnataka High Court. So it's a very interesting situation right now for the Karnataka police as well. Could they have done better to oppose his request for traveling abroad at a time when they had challenged this matter of his bail being granted in the Supreme Court as well? Was it the right time for the courts as well to grant him permission to travel abroad for whatever reasons maybe? Because when we saw those pictures, we saw some of his family members as well traveling with him. These are questions that will definitely come up, even as now the orders for this particular challenge of bail have now been reserved by the Supreme Court of India.